Thank the honourable member for her comments, and I can reassure her I am listening, and indeed I welcome all the suggestions that she's made, and indeed all honourable members will make. We are listening attentively, both honourable members and to businesses and others, to make sure that we can provide the support that is required. To answer the specific questions, the Barnett consequences resulting from today's package will be about £3.5 billion. My honourable friend, the Chief Secretary, will be speaking to the Scottish Finance Minister, I believe tomorrow, to explain in more detail how this will work. And I would say that what we did earlier this week is to release the Barnett consequentials to devolved authorities before that money has been drawn down in England, as would be typical, to provide advance on the Barnett consequentials to all devolved authorities in recognition of the circumstances that everyone is grappling with, so that they can plan appropriately. And I hope that that would be welcomed. Obviously, it wouldn't be appropriate for me to comment on the specifics of any intervention in any particular company, whether it's airlines or anything else, but I agree with her that in general, we are interested in protecting people's jobs. And when I stand here and talk about supporting businesses, I'm keen to support businesses because that's the best way to protect jobs, and that ultimately is the best way to help people. She asked about the cash grants, Mr. Speaker. What I would say in terms of thinking about the scale of these grants and how significant they might be, for let's take the £10,000 grant available for anyone currently in receipt of small business rate relief, the typical rateable value on one of those properties would be about £7,000 approximately. That's a good proxy for a year's worth of rent. A £10,000 cash grant is therefore reasonably significant in covering what is probably the biggest fixed cost of a business, and then looked on an income level as well as what an average income might be of one of those smaller businesses. Again, it will be significant. And she talked, of course, about pubs and the leisure sector. In that sector, not only will there be a business rates holiday for the next 12 months for all businesses in that sector, regardless of their rateable value, there will be also a £25,000 cash grant for businesses up to £51,000. She asked about insurance. What I would say to her, I think the statement today is welcome on insurance. In terms of retrospectively changing insurance policies, that is rightly something that she identified would cause solvency issues, most likely with insurance companies, so is not perhaps the most appropriate course of action, which is why we have several other measures of support directly to business in these circumstances. And she will probably be aware that very few businesses actually have the requisite insurance in any case. So although the steps today are welcome, it is important we think more broadly about direct support. I welcome her question on maternity pay, which I will go away and talk to my honourable friend, the Work and Pension Secretary, about and reflect on that. With regard to renters, again, my earlier answer stands. My honourable friend, the Housing Secretary, will shortly be making an announcement about further measures to protect renters. And in closing, she talked about other countries and fiscal responses and individual measures. Every country is doing this slightly differently, but broadly are trying to do the same things through different means. I think the best way to judge us is to judge this total scale of our fiscal response, and on that metric, as a percentage of GDP benchmarked to almost all developed countries, we have what is to date one of the most comprehensive and significant packages of scale, which underlies our commitment, as I said, to do what it takes to get the country through this.
David Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I strongly welcome the Chancellor's enormous loan and guarantee package, but he himself recognised that this is supporting the liquidity of businesses rather than their long-term viability. We want to see the employment protected. So can I ask him that he doesn't just fund business in ways that enable the maintenance of employment, but actively incentivises the maintenance of employment? It's not the same thing. Block grants won't do it. And when he does that, he does it by more than just going the route of sectoral support packages. If he takes sectoral support packages, tens of thousands of small businesses will fall through the cracks, which means, unfortunately, an incredibly tailored system. And he'll have to design really rather intricate mechanisms for ensuring that we pay people properly. That may involve small claims courts, it may involve the insurance business, it may involve British Chambers of Commerce and the like. Can I ask him, however, to look at that? Because it's important he's done what he's done today in terms of maintaining liquidity, but his main aim must be to maintain the viability of the British economy.
I think my right honourable friend makes a good point. I do believe providing liquidity now ensures sustainability for the future, which is why it is important. But he's right to identify the further steps needed in providing support on fixed costs, for example, employment, and preserving and incentivising that employment, and that is urgently the work that we are undertaking.
Rachel Reeves.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. If you are off work at the moment on statutory sick pay or self-isolating for public health reasons, if you are laid off because there is no work, if you are self-employed or if you are low paid, there is nothing at all today in the package of measures from the Chancellor. The Chancellor says that these things are under review. Well, as a matter of urgency, could he at least increase statutory sick pay to the level of the national living wage and come back to this House with a whole package of support that ensures that workers are not going to be financially penalised for doing the right thing and not being able to pay their bills, their rents and put food on the table?
Well, I could say that to the right honourable member, we have spent £1 billion into the welfare system to provide extra financial security for those people, to speed up both access and the generosity of all of those benefits.
Harriet Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the Chancellor and his team for all that's been announced today. And I know that those in the retail hospitality sector in West Worcestershire will be very pleased to hear what he has announced today. There is a sector of the retail market that is doing incredibly well, and that is the supermarkets. And in fact, many of my constituents are worried because they rely on those home deliveries from supermarkets. Can the Chancellor update the House on what he is doing with his colleagues to talk to the supermarket industry about increasing capacity for home delivery?
My honourable friend makes an excellent point. I can tell her that the Agriculture Secretary is in urgent talks with supermarkets to ensure the security of our food supply and to improve accessibility, particularly for those who may now be at home.
Yes, Phillips.
Mr. Speaker, I simply want to ask the Chancellor if he could live on £94.25 per week. A simple question. Has he ever lived on that? And could he live on that? Because that's what most of my constituents are currently having to live on.
Mr. Speaker, we believe in a strong safety net for people through a short period of time to get through this, which is why we have strengthened that safety net with £1 billion of extra investment to increase the generosity and accessibility.
Ian Duncan-Smith.
Mr. Speaker, can I commend my right honourable friend the Chancellor for his bold measures today, which will encourage many small businesses to believe that the government is on their side. There's more to do, I know. Can I also encourage him, though, in his statement to come on further employment measures, to bear in mind the most important thing we can do is to do everything we can to keep people in employment. It will help with their growth. But one area I want to raise with him, which has not really been touched on, I do think the Shadow Chancellor raised it, it's the voluntary sector. The Centre for Social Justice has done some quick work on this and come to the conclusion that the smallest elements of the voluntary sector, who have no reserves, are going to lose about £400 million during the course of this next few months, and they're going to be the ones that are called upon most for support in the community to those who suffer. Could I please ask him to look at this very carefully and see what we can do to give them that cash aid?
Well, my right honourable friend knows better than most the value of making sure that people have the security of a good job, and I commend him for all his work in that regard and agree with him wholeheartedly. My right honourable friend, the Community Secretary, is talking already to the voluntary sector, and we stand ready to provide the support that may be required.
Ed Miliband.
Can I say to the Chancellor that I recognise, and I'm sure the whole House does, his wish to get any employment support scheme right. But he will recognise, as the Shadow Chancellor said from the front bench, that people are facing redundancy right now. Can I suggest two things he can say tonight to help ward off those redundancies? First, that he accepts the principle that government should cover a substantial proportion of people's wages because it's in the interests of them, the economy and their businesses. And secondly, that he undertakes to come back not next week, but by Friday of this week with a clear plan developed with unions and businesses.
what I'd say to the honourable member is it's more important that we get this right than rush to things that won't work. But he can rest assured that we agree wholeheartedly with the ambitions of what he says, but delivering them and getting it right is vital, and that's what we're working on doing.
George Freeman.
Congratulate and thank the Chancellor on behalf of the people of Mid Norfolk for a coherent and comprehensive package, in particular the support for rates and mortgages. In my rural and quite fragile economy, it is the pubs, the high streets, the small businesses, tourism and farming and food processing that are the backbone of the economy. Could I press him on the insurance point? Many of my local employers, their policies simply don't cover liability for epidemics. Wouldn't it be sensible to look at reinforcing the insurance industry, who've got the wherewithal to deliver the support, so that they, who've made money in the good years, can help companies that really need it in tough times?
I appreciate the point my honourable friend's making. I think the steps today are welcome on insurance, but he's right to identify that retrospectively changing the situation that insurers would have reserved against could have very significant impact on their solvency, which would send a ripple effect throughout the entire insurance market, which is not something that I think any of us would want to see.
Angela Riedel.
Mr. Speaker, the Chancellor must surely recognise that those on statutory sick pay are being asked to protect the rest of us, but take only £96 a week in income and live on that, and that those on universal credit, if they can access the system at all, will be asked to live on £74 a week, and millions of people are simply not eligible for either of those deeply flawed structures. He has to do something fast. He has to do it quickly. Instead of talking about the £1 billion he's already put in, will he now realise that he's got to move fast to reassure people that if they do the right thing, they will not suffer and they'll be able to put food on the table and maintain their housing and their children's meals?
Mr. Speaker, we have provided £500 million specifically to local authorities to provide extra support, particularly to help people with housing costs, notably council tax, and that will make an enormous difference to people on the ground.
Mark Eastwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Many mortgage payers within my constituency will welcome the 3-month holiday announced today. However, could the Chancellor confirm whether this will be implemented automatically by the banks